It was the way she handed me the money like she was dropping a coin into a beggar's cup. Margaret Winslow pressed a crumpled 50-pound note into my palm, her fingers deliberately avoiding mine. If you're so determined to be independent, take it and don't lose it. I looked past her shoulder toward the hallway, where Fiona stood with her arms crossed, leaning against the doorframe. The slight smirk on her lips, that look of someone who had just won a small, private victory, cut deeper than any insult. I scanned the room. Aunt Edith was studying the floral pattern on her teacup, as if it held the secrets of the universe. Cousin Henry had developed a sudden fascination with a crack in the ceiling plaster. Old Morris from next door was squinting at a bird outside the window with theatrical intensity. No one spoke. No one said, "This is too far." No one even cleared their throat. My father, Alistair Winslow, in his eternally pristine cashmere cardigan, pulled open the front door with deliberate slowness. The night air rushed in, carrying the damp, grassy smell of the Yorkshire countryside, the smell of everything I was about to lose. "When you understand what family loyalty actually means," he said, his voice as calm as a weather forecast, "you can come back." I had one worn backpack, 50 pounds in my fist, 3 stone steps to the gravel path. My boot had barely touched the first one when the oak door slammed behind me, thump, and the copper wall lamp above the porch flickered and died. The whole Georgian gray stone house sank into darkness, like a beast that had finally dropped its mask of civility. In that moment, standing alone in the dark with nothing but the sound of my own breathing, I understood something I had suspected for years but never allowed myself to admit. They weren't afraid of losing me. They were afraid of losing the use of me. I had never been a daughter to them. I had been a tool, a blank piece of paper, a signature that could be forged. My name is Eleanor Winslow. I was 29 years old then. The afternoon before, my phone had buzzed itself across my desk like a trapped insect. 88 missed calls, all from the same 2 entries in my contacts, home and Winslow House. By the time the count hit 70, I'd turned the phone face down on my desk and watched my coffee mug vibrate in concentric rings. 88 chances. In any one of those calls, they could have said, "Eleanor, we're sorry. We were wrong. We should have come for you." Not one voicemail contained those words. Every message was different phrasing, different justifications, but they all shared the same hollow core. "We need you now." 5 years earlier, I had been thrown out of that house with nothing but a backpack, a phone with a spiderweb screen, and a 50-pound note pressed into my hand like an afterthought. After that night, they had vanished from my life completely. No birthday cards, no Christmas invitations, no phone calls when I was hospitalized with appendicitis. Nothing. In the eyes of everyone in Moreton, I had become that difficult girl who made a scene over nothing, a topic best avoided at dinner parties and church socials. Then, last week, someone at the government records office had cross-referenced my national insurance number with a probate file, my late grandmother's trust fund. The money was enough to plug the hole in my father's bad investment, enough to keep the Winslow name polished and respectable in Moreton for another generation. Overnight, I was no longer the unstable one, no longer the ungrateful child. I was family again. Before I tell you about those 88 calls, before I tell you what they were really after, let me ask you something. Where are you sitting right now? What's the weather like outside your window? Is it calm and clear, heavy and gray? Or is there a storm coming? Because the storm that broke me arrived on an ordinary Tuesday evening, and I had no idea it was coming. Moreton is the kind of Yorkshire village where the butcher smiles at you when you walk in and talks about you to his lamb chops when you leave. We lived at the end of Sycamore Lane in a cream-colored stucco house with white shutters and a cast-iron swing on the front porch. From the street, it looked like something off a postcard, quaint, warm, the sort of place where families gathered for Sunday roasts and laughed around the fireplace. But inside those walls, everything came with a price tag. My father, Alistair, was a loan manager at the local Mutual Savings Society. He wore tweed waistcoats and spoke in measured, trustworthy tones, the kind of man old ladies entrusted with their pensions without a second thought. My mother, Margaret, was a college counselor at Moreton High, a woman who could wrap a barbed insult in butterscotch sweet tones and deliver it with a smile. And then there was my sister. Fiona Winslow was the sun around which the entire household orbited. When she failed her A-levels, they called it a creative detour. When she was fired from a bar job after 2 weeks, they praised her refusal to settle. When she maxed out the credit card my mother gave her on designer handbags, they said she had an eye for quality. Meanwhile, I worked 60 hours a week at a dental clinic reception desk and stacked shelves at Boots on weekends. I paid my own rent, bought my own groceries, saved every spare pound for a distance learning course in nonprofit management at the University of Manchester. I wanted a life I could stand up straight in. No one ever asked me what I wanted. The break came in July 2021 on a sweltering evening when my mother threw a garden party to celebrate Fiona passing her real estate licensing exam. Fairy lights twisted through the apple trees. Disposable platters groaned under grilled lamb chops and potato salad. Relatives milled about with Pim's cups, laughing like a family from a country living photo shoot. I was 24, working the dental reception by day and stacking painkillers and vitamin bottles by night. I'd saved just enough to put a deposit on that Manchester course. Nobody asked about it. My mother raised a glass of lemonade and announced, "To the bravest girl in this family, the one who dares to dream big." Everyone clapped and cheered. I clapped too. I'd learned long ago that if I didn't go along with Fiona, the blame would find me anyway. After dinner, while the relatives lingered on the lawn, I went into the kitchen to clear dishes. On the counter, I spotted my father's leather portfolio folder, left behind by accident. I wouldn't have touched it, except that my full name was printed on the cover. Eleanor Winslow. My hands went cold before my brain caught up. Inside the folder, I found a personal installment loan agreement. £8,000, opened nearly a year earlier. Every repayment mark was red. Overdue, all of them. The credit score I had guarded like a glass house had been smashed to pieces without my knowledge. I walked back into the garden, the folder clutched against my chest. "Dad, why is there a loan taken out in my name?" The laughter cut off like a blade. Alistair glanced at the folder, and there was no surprise on his face. That told me everything I needed to know. Margaret rose slowly, her skirt brushing the chair legs. "Eleanor, this isn't the time." Then when my voice shook, Fiona didn't look up from her phone. "That money was for my staging business. You know, I needed to furnish the show houses. I never signed anything." I said, each word deliberate. Alistair lowered his voice into that reasonable, father-knows-best tone. "You're blowing this out of proportion. It's a family matter. We handle it internally. You committed fraud, identity fraud." Fiona snorted. "Your credit wasn't worth much anyway." That stung worse than a slap. I looked around the garden. Aunt Edith had turned toward the barbecue. Cousin Henry was studying his shoes. Old Morris was suddenly fascinated by a mosquito on his arm. No one asked to see the file. No one asked if I'd actually signed anything. Alistair snatched the folder from me. "Do you really have to embarrass your mother in front of everyone?" Margaret's eyes welled up with tears, impeccable timing, down to the millisecond. "You see," she said, her voice quavering, "this is what I deal with every day." She finds one piece of paper and turns it into an attack on the whole family. "It's a crime," I said. That cracked the veneer of civility. Margaret's tears vanished. Alastair stepped toward me. Fiona shoved her chair back with a screech. "Oh, my God, you are impossible." That night, they stuffed my clothes into black garbage bags and left them on the porch steps. Before I'd even reached the bottom of those 3 stone steps, the door slammed behind me, the porch light went out, and I was standing in the Yorkshire night with 50 pounds, a backpack, and a broken phone. I had been a spare identity, a blank signature, nothing more. People think leaving a toxic family is a dramatic, cinematic moment, swelling music, a clear horizon, the road to freedom stretching ahead like a golden ribbon. The reality was very different. 3 in the morning, counting coins in a motorway service station bathroom, a National Express coach station bench, watching my phone screen go black. The sick, hollow certainty that I had nowhere to go and even less desire to turn back. I bought the cheapest ticket to the farthest place I could reach, Brighton, a seaside town I'd never visited, far enough that Margaret couldn't drive down and stage a performance of Grieving Mother for the neighbors. Brighton was never a destination. It was an escape route. I swapped my Boots staff discount card with a former colleague for 20 pounds in cash and scraped together the fare. The coach ride took nearly 9 hours of fitful dozing. Every time I woke, I checked my phone. No calls, no messages. Not from my mother, not from my father, not from Fiona. When the coach pulled into Brighton, the sky was a cold, gray blue, and I had 43 pounds to my name. No job, no home, and a credit report that made me look like a deadbeat. The first 3 nights, I slept in a women's shelter in the city center, my backpack strapped to my ankle. It held my only remaining identification. On the 4th day, I tried to rent a room in Kemp Town. The landlord checked my credit, and his face shifted. "Your repayment history is a mess." I wanted to tell him the truth. My father had forged my signature. My family had thrown me out for refusing to be their scapegoat. But to a stranger holding a rental application, that sounded like the excuse it wasn't. I ended up renting half a storage room in a Victorian basement. The landlord was a deaf old widower who took cash and didn't ask about credit. The ceiling leaked when it rained. The carpet smelled of wet cardboard. The space heater clicked on every half hour like a trapped squirrel scratching in the walls. Every night I told myself, this is temporary. I said it for 11 months. Through a temp agency, I found work at a Brighton housing charity called Bright Path, scanning housing benefit applications. The job was supposed to last 3 weeks. The pay barely covered instant noodles, a bus pass, and the cheapest black trousers from Primark. But in the archive room at Bright Path, I watched people walk through the door every day with folders clutched to their chests, eviction notices, benefit denial letters, utility cutoff warnings, credit reports full of errors they didn't know how to fix. Their faces looked exactly like mine had that night in the garden with the folder in my hands. Shocked, helpless, wronged. I understood, in a way I couldn't articulate, that a piece of paper could be a weapon in the wrong hands. At first, I just scanned and filed and checked addresses. But I checked everything twice. A misspelled name, a misplaced digit. I knew too well how those things could shatter a life that was already hanging by a thread. Patricia Harris, the operations manager, noticed me in my 2nd week. I was crouched by a filing cabinet, correcting a batch of applications that had been rejected due to coding errors. Patricia walked up with her ever-present mug of black tea and asked, "Who taught you to review documents like this?" I almost laughed. The honest answer was fear. But I said, "No one taught me. I just saw what happens when a document goes wrong." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Eleanor, start coming to my office tomorrow. We need someone with a closer." That was the first turning point. But the 88 missed calls still hung over me like a ghost. I knew the Winslow family didn't do anything for free. If they'd tracked me down across the internet, it wasn't for an apology. It was for the trust fund. And this time, I wouldn't be their blank signature. The day after the calls, I turned my phone over at my desk and stared at the number, 88. Patricia passed by with her mug, glanced at my face, and said nothing. After 4 years at Bright Path, she had learned when to leave space. After work, I walked the Brighton seafront. The English Channel wind whipped salt spray against my face, and gulls wheeled overhead, their cries sharp and desolate. I sat on a graffiti-covered bench, thumb hovering over the green call button next to the contact labeled Home. 5 years. They'd thrown me out without a single word of regret. Now, 88 calls, all because of my grandmother's trust fund. I'd learned early that Winslows didn't make deals that didn't favor them. When I was 14, Fiona smashed my mother's favorite Wedgwood vase and blamed me. Margaret, after listening to Fiona's tearful testimony, had looked at me and said, "Eleanor, why do you always have to make trouble for this family?" I pressed the button. It rang once. They answered so fast that I knew someone had been waiting with the phone in their hand. "Eleanor." Margaret's voice, still that cloying jam-sweet tone. "Darling, you finally called back. Mummy was so worried." The short version. I cut her off. The wind was tangling my hair, and I pressed the phone tight to my ear. A beat of silence, then the rustle of the phone being handed over. Alistair's voice. "Eleanor, your grandmother's trust fund requires all direct heirs to sign off on the distribution. Your share." "I don't want your money." I said it flatly. The minute I walked out that door, I was done with everything that has the Winslow name on it. "It's £600,000, Eleanor." His voice dropped into that false reasonable register. "You're living on your own, barely scraping by. I have a place. The law requires you to. You forged my identity for a loan. If you want my signature, fix my credit report first. 8 years of overdue marks. How are you going to explain that?" A sharp intake of breath. On the other end, Margaret, then Fiona's voice, shrill and defensive. "She's bringing that up again? We paid it back. You paid the principal." My knuckles went white around the phone. "The overdue marks have been on my report for 5 years. Did you pay the interest? Did you explain it to the credit agencies?" "Eleanor," Alistair said, back in his negotiation voice, "we can make a deal. Come back to Moreton. Sign the papers in person. We'll clear up your credit. You expect me to trust you? Then what do you want?" What did I want? I closed my eyes. The wind cut through my jacket like a blade. What I wanted was what they should have given me 5 years ago: an apology, an admission that they'd been wrong, that I was never the troublemaker they made me out to be. But I couldn't say that to Alistair. He'd use it to manipulate me. I want a written, notarized statement of everything that happened. I said, the loan, the forgery, who benefited, who knew, full disclosure, sealed and signed. Silence stretched across the line. The gulls wheeled overhead, shadows passing across the pavement. "You're threatening your own family, Eleanor." Alistair's voice had cracked, just a hairline fracture, but I heard it. I call it fairness. I hung up. The next morning, I arrived at Bright Path 40 minutes early. Patricia was already there. As always, first in mug of strong black tea, frowning at a monthly report on her screen. "You didn't sleep well," she said without looking up. I pulled out my chair and sat. Patricia had a strange, owl-like way of seeing everything without making a fuss. For years ago, she'd moved me from scanning to first stage review, then to community outreach. Last year, she'd put my name forward for records manager. The title didn't come with much of a raise, but it gave me something solid to show landlords. "Family stuff," I said. Patricia set down her mug and turned to face me. She was in her early 50s, silver-streaked short hair, fine lines around her eyes, and a wardrobe that seemed permanently set to beige cardigan and khaki trousers. "Those 88 calls. I nodded. Are you going back? No. She studied me for a long moment. I've known you 4 years, Eleanor. You're the kind of person who checks every file 3 times. You plan ahead. If those calls had you sitting on a seafront bench for an hour in the cold, this is bigger than you're letting on. I dropped my gaze. Patricia was usually right. I need a few days off, I said. Not to Moreton, to Liverpool. My grandmother's solicitor is there. I need to understand the trust fund before anyone else touches it. Patricia pulled a blank leave request from her drawer. If you need help. Thank you. Not yet. She didn't push. That was why I'd stayed. She left room to breathe, but made sure you knew she'd give more than you asked for. After I'd filled in the form, I scrolled through my contacts to a number I hadn't dialed in 5 years. Edwin Harper, my grandmother's solicitor. The year I'd left Moreton, he'd texted my old phone with a single line. If you need legal help, my door is always open. I hadn't responded, partly because I couldn't afford a lawyer, partly because I didn't know if he was my mother's pawn. But that text was still in my records, like a dusty life ring I'd never used. The phone rang 3 times before a gravelly, steady voice answered. Harper and Associates. Mr. Harper, this is Eleanor Winslow. 3 seconds of silence. Eleanor, child, I've been waiting for your call. My throat tightened. When someone you haven't spoken to in 5 years says, I've been waiting, you have to ask yourself, were they really waiting, or are they reading someone else's script? I had to find out in person. I'd like to see you. About my grandmother's trust fund. Tomorrow at 3, my office. He paused. You're coming alone? Alone. Then tomorrow it is. Eleanor, your grandmother told me things your parents don't know. My heart lurched. What kind of things? In person. Call when you reach Liverpool. My assistant will meet you at the station. I hung up and stared at my own reflection in the dark phone screen. My face had changed in 5 years. New lines at the corners of my eyes, sharper jaw, a kind of watchfulness in my gaze that hadn't been there before. I didn't know what to call it, alertness, maybe hardness. But somewhere along the way, the girl who'd counted coins in a service station bathroom had been left behind under a Brighton street lamp on a rainy night. Lime Street Station was as chaotic as I remembered. When I stepped onto the platform, a woman in a gray suit held up a sign, Eleanor Winslow. Her name was Diana, Harper's assistant, and she drove me through the red brick streets to a Georgian office building. Harper's office was on the 3rd floor. The smell hit me first, old paper and cigar smoke, that particular scent of a lifetime's worth of files. He'd aged more than I'd expected. Thinner, completely white-haired, sitting in a deep green leather chair behind a massive oak desk. Child, he said, rising to take my hand. His palm was dry and warm. You've grown. You haven't changed, I said, the reflexive, polite lie. He smiled, a careful, appraising look behind his spectacles. Sit. Tea. No, thank you. I'll be direct. What's the truth about the trust fund? My parents said it requires all direct heirs to sign. But I checked. The original will from 20 years ago only covered my grandparents' estate. Harper leaned back, fingers laced across his stomach. You're right. The original will didn't have the provisions your parents are claiming. He paused. However, your grandmother amended the will 3 months before she died, without your parents' knowledge. I sat up straighter. What did she change? He pulled a manila envelope from his drawer. My full name was written across the front in my grandmother's elegant, forceful hand. She added a codicil, specifying that of the 600,000, 200,000 must be personally authorized by you. No one else can touch it without your written consent. I took the envelope. The red wax seal cracked as I opened it. Inside was a single sheet, headed to my granddaughter Eleanor Winslow, dated March 12th, 2019, 7 weeks before she died. It wasn't long, but I read it 3 times. Dear Eleanor, I'm writing this after a phone call with your mother. She told me you had personality issues and that you always make trouble. I listened for 30 minutes, and then I told her that of everyone I'd ever known, you were the least likely to make trouble. You were the one who took the blame for the vase when you were 14. I saw it with my own eyes. I was parking outside the garden gate. Fiona swept the pieces into a bin, ran inside crying, and you said nothing. I knew then that you were the only person in that house who carried weight for others. They don't deserve you. So my money, your share, will be yours to do with as you choose. No one else touches it. Love, always. Grandmother. I folded the letter carefully back into the envelope. My eyes burned, but I held the tears back. Harper quietly pushed a box of tissues toward me. Does my mother know about this codicil? I asked, my voice rougher than I wanted it to be. Not at all. Your grandmother instructed me to keep it confidential unless you came looking for it. He adjusted his glasses. So, when your parents contacted me last week about activating the trust, I sent them a copy of the codicil as part of the process. Your mother's reaction was notable, which was, she was silent for a long time. Then she asked who wrote the letter. I told her it was your grandmother. She asked if the money truly required your signature. I said yes. She hung up and called you the next day. 88 calls. My mother had discovered a lock that only I could open, and that lock held 200,000 pounds. Enough to patch the holes in my father's bad loans, Fiona's blown credit cards, the never-ending renovations on that gray stone house. Mr. Harper, I said, meeting his eyes, what happens if I refuse to sign? The funds remain frozen. If no claim is made within 10 years, the money goes to the designated charity. The charity your grandmother named is, he glanced at a file, Bright Path Housing Assistance. In Brighton. I blinked. What? It's in the codicil. In the event Eleanor does not claim her portion, the remainder is to be donated to Brighton's Bright Path Housing Assistance. The organization helps people evicted due to credit issues, a cause close to my heart. The office clock ticked in the silence. My grandmother had known. She'd known I'd leave that house. She'd known where I'd end up. She'd even arranged that if I didn't want the money, it would still find its way to me. I stood up. Harper rose with me. Child, if you'd like me to draft. What I want is simple. I steadied my voice. My parents forged my name on a loan with 8 years of overdue marks. If I sign, they need to submit a written statement to the credit agencies admitting the forgery, and the 200,000 goes into a trust account, third-party oversight on how it's used. Harper scribbled notes. Reasonable, but your mother. She doesn't have a choice. I touched the letter in my pocket. I have my grandmother's words. She has debts she can't pay. Diana handed me a cup of tea on my way out. I leaned against the corridor wall and read my grandmother's letter one more time. The seafront wind, the basement mold, the stacks of files at Bright Path, all of it suddenly felt different, heavier in a different way. It wasn't just my pain anymore. It was being seen. Someone had been watching. She just hadn't been alive to tell me. Back in Brighton, I wrote a formal email through Harper's office, cold, clear, and final, to Alastair and Margaret Winslow, regarding the codicil to my grandmother Isabel Winslow's will. I am aware of its full contents. The following conditions must be met before I sign. Alastair Winslow must submit a signed statement to the 3 major credit agencies acknowledging he opened a personal loan in my name in 2020 without my authorization, and that the overdue marks are not my responsibility. Margaret Winslow must provide a written apology regarding the false accusation of the broken Wedgwood vase in 2014 copied to Harper and Associates. The £200,000 allocated by the codicil will be placed in a trust account overseen by Harper and Associates, with proceeds directed to Brighton housing assistance programs. Once these conditions are met, I will sign within 3 working days. Additionally, if any condition remains unmet within 30 days, I will permanently forfeit my claim, and the entire designated sum will pass to the charity named in the codicil. Yours, Eleanor Winslow. 48 hours of silence. They were waiting for me to soften, to call and talk, to be 14 again, and take the blame. I didn't call. Meanwhile, I drafted a proposal for Bright Paths Board. Patricia read it and raised her eyebrows, a rare expression of surprise. £200,000, all for a community credit repair pilot. Yes, I sketched on the whiteboard. Right now, we're handling emergencies, evictions, utility shutoffs. But the real root is credit. One medical bill overdue, and people spiral. If we had a fund to cover small arrears and connect people to free credit counseling and legal help, we could stop them before they're at the door. Patricia leaned back. You know, once this goes to the board, your parents can't touch it. It becomes institutional. Exactly. She was quiet. Then she laughed, quietly. Eleanor, when you started, your hands shook at the scanner. Now you're asking me for a project budget template. I looked down, because my name is visible now. She didn't push. That evening she took me to an Indian restaurant down the street and told me her own story. Her ex-husband had taken out loans in her name, and it had taken her a decade to clear her credit. So when I asked who taught you to review files, she said, stirring her lassie, it's because I saw myself in you. That night, for the first time, Brighton didn't feel like a temporary stop. It felt like a city with streets, with streetlights, with someone who'd bring you curry on a rainy night. A week later, Harper sent a draft statement from Alastair Winslow to the credit agencies. The language was a masterpiece of weaseling. Alastair Winslow, confirmed that in 2020 a loan was inadvertently opened in my daughter Eleanor's name due to an internal administrative error. Inadvertently. Internal error. I stared at it in my cubicle. He denied it for 5 months, until the codicil forced his hand. Revise. I emailed back. Use the words forgery, unauthorized, and without my daughter's knowledge. Non-negotiable. Harper called that afternoon. His voice was unusually hesitant. Your mother came to my office. She cried for 2 hours. Was anyone else there? Just me and her assistant. Then she was performing. A pause. Eleanor, I've seen a lot of wills and a lot of family rifts. Your mother's situation is more complicated than. She never apologized. From the time I was 14 until now, 15 years. Another long silence. I'll revise the statement as you asked. Harper said, but child, I've been a lawyer for 40 years. I've seen people turn into islands for the sake of being right. You can win this, but think about where you want to stand after. I'm on my path, I said. I won't give them leverage again. I sat at my desk for a long time. Patricia walked past and left a packet of digestives and a cup of tea without a word. 2 weeks later, Harper confirmed that Alastair had signed the amended statement, and Margaret had delivered a written apology for the vase. Both notarized. Conditions met. Only the final signing remained. Then Fiona arrived in Brighton. I was leaving Bright Path when I saw her, leaning against the street lamp in a camel wool coat, knee-high boots, hair perfectly blown out like she'd walked off a magazine spread. She looked up from her phone, tucked it in her bag, and smiled. That smile. It was the same as 5 years ago, the right curve, the right warmth like it had been rehearsed. Eleanor. She stepped forward, heels clicking. It's been a while. I stopped, gripping my backpack strap. How did you find me? Harper's assistant. She shrugged, as if it were nothing. I was in town. Thought I'd stop by. You took a 5-hour train to stop by. Fiona doesn't need a reason. You know that. What I know, I said, is that whenever you stop by, there's a bill for me to pay. Her smile flickered, then snapped back. Come on, sis. We've all grown up. I'm not your sister. I counted on my fingers. I'm the one you blamed for the vase. I'm the one whose identity paid for your business. I'm the one you threw out and didn't call for 5 years. Which of those got grown up away? Fiona's face dropped. The polished smile vanished, replaced by something colder. Fine. You want to go over the past. If grandmother hadn't left that letter, would you have called back? No. Exactly. Her voice rose. Mom cries about you every week. Dad risked his 20-year reputation to sign that statement. Do you know what happens if that statement gets around? He's the man the whole town trusts. He shouldn't have forged someone's identity. He was helping me. Then you're both at fault. I kept my voice flat. Fiona, you've never been poor. I slept in a shelter. I lived in a basement with a leaking ceiling. I split a sandwich for lunch. While you wore a 1,500-pound coat, I slept on an archive room floor. Fiona's eyes reddened. This time, I couldn't tell if it was real or not. She stepped forward and grabbed my wrist, harder than I expected. Please come home. Mum says she can redecorate your old room. It's your walk-in closet now, isn't it? She let go, stepped back. Her mouth tightened. You've changed. Yes. I looked at her. I'm not afraid of you anymore. She stood under the street lamp for a long moment, wind tangling her hair, shoulders trembling. 5 years ago, I would have gone to her, said, "It's okay, I'll fix it." And she'd have let me, and I'd have carried the weight again. But now I just watched. If you're done, I said, last train to Moreton is at 9:30. 15 minutes that way. She lifted her eyes. Something I'd never seen before flickered there. Confusion. You really don't want us? You didn't want me first. I walked away toward my basement. No footsteps followed. About 50 steps on, I heard her call my name. I didn't turn around. That night, lying on my mattress, staring at the water stains on the ceiling, my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. I'm sorry about the vase. Fiona. I put the phone face down and turned over. Rain was hitting the window above the basement. It sounded like the night I'd lain in my room in Moreton at 14, listening to my mother say to my father, "Eleanor is getting more difficult." I hadn't defended myself. The next morning, Fiona had smiled at me over breakfast, bright and innocent, and I'd washed the dishes and gone to school. The girl who'd done that 14-year-old, had finally learned to say no. The signing was at Harper's Liverpool office. I arrived the day before and stayed in a cheap hostel, 6 to a room, bunks, dim bedside lights. I barely slept. At 10 the next morning, I walked into Harper's office. Alistair and Margaret were already there on the green leather sofa. Fiona hadn't come. Alistair wore a dark gray suit, tie, hair combed. Margaret was in ivory, carefully made up, eyes faintly pink. They both looked at me like they couldn't decide whether to smile or cry. Eleanor. Margaret stood, arms open. I stepped back, paperwork first. She froze, arms in the air, then let them fall. Alistair cleared his throat and pulled out the documents. Harper sat behind his desk, 3 copies laid out. I sat. I reviewed Alistair's statement, correct wording, Margaret's apology for the vase. Her signature was there, hurried as if she'd written it with a trembling hand. The trust allocation form, £200,000 into Harper's managed account. I picked up the pen and signed. Eleanor Winslow, 6 letters. I wrote slowly. When I clicked the cap back on, Harper took the document. The room was silent. Margaret's shoulders hitched, making tiny sniffing sounds. Alistair stared at the desktop, fingers tapping. "It's done," I said. Eleanor, Alistair's voice came out low, hollow. You're out there alone. I'm fine. You don't even have a permanent. I have work. I have colleagues. I have a project starting. Don't worry. I'm your father. You're my biological father. I stood. You haven't acted like one. Margaret's head snapped up, tears streaming. How can you say that? Mother, you performed in that garden for everyone. Did you think about today then? She opened her mouth, but nothing came. Alistair pulled her sleeve, signaling her to sit. Harper sealed the documents. Legal process complete. You may all leave. Eleanor, stay a moment. My parents walked out. As Margaret passed me, she paused, her eyes on my face, lips moving like she wanted to speak. She said nothing. The door closed. Harper pulled out another envelope. My name again, but typed this time. Your grandmother left you this, he said, separate from the codicil. She asked me to give it to you when you'd made your own life decisions. I opened it. Inside, a key and a slip of paper. 7 Mill Lane, Evesham, Worcestershire. And a line, a house I lived in when I was young. No one knows about it. The deed transferred to you in 2017. A brass key, cold and toothed, pressing into my palm. A small terrace cottage, Harper said, 2 bedrooms, a garden, worth about £250,000. Your grandmother paid the taxes and upkeep from her pension. There's only this one key. I destroyed the other. I tucked it into my jacket pocket, over my heart. She never told me. She told no one but me. Harper adjusted his glasses. Eleanor, your grandmother did only 2 things against Winslow family rules. Married your grandfather. He was a postman. Her father wanted a titled match. And gave you this house. Can you check the property records for me? I'd like to see it. Already arranged. He pushed another file toward me. And he paused. A photo of your grandmother. She asked me to give it to you when you decided to go. I pulled the small paper envelope open. A photograph. An older woman in a flowered dress, sitting in a garden chair with a book open on her lap, a teacup beside her. Sunlight on her face. A calm, certain smile. Thank you, I said. Don't thank me. Harper leaned forward slightly. Your grandmother said, Eleanor will find her own way at the right time. I'm just leaving the door open for her. The train from Liverpool to Worcestershire took about 2.5 hours. The landscape shifted from grey city to rolling green hills, sheep scattered like white dots across the slopes. I stared at my reflection in the window, a 29-year-old woman gripping a key, stomach full of butterflies. Evesham was even smaller than Moreton. One high street, a post office, a pub. Mill Lane sat at the edge, plane trees lining the cobblestones, autumn leaves thick on the ground. Number 7 was a warm red brick terraced cottage with white window frames and a hanging basket of dead geraniums on the porch. I put the key in the lock. It stuck, rusted from disuse, then turned. The smell when the door swung open. Old wood, dried flowers, the dusty warmth of a house that had been waiting. The front room was small, with dark red quarry tiles and a fireplace mantel holding a few old books and a blue china dish. Windows looked onto a garden gone, wild with knee-high grass, an apple tree with a few small fruits still clinging. I went upstairs. 2 bedrooms. The larger had an iron bed frame, mattress still wrapped in plastic. The smaller had an old desk, drawers full of blank writing paper and unopened ink pens. Kitchen cupboards held jars of jam 5 years, expired, and a packet of biscuits that had stopped being fresh in 2018. I opened the back door into the garden. The grass came up past my calves, but in the corner I saw it, an old rose bush covered in clusters of deep red flowers, half faded but still blooming. My grandmother's favorite, dark red roses. I remembered how she'd bring a bunch from her garden every summer when she visited Moreton. My mother would take them with a smile, put them in a vase in the hallway, and toss them in the compost when they wilted. Grandmother never said a word, but she kept bringing them. I knelt and touched a petal, soft, just starting to wither at the edges. That afternoon, I bought shears and gloves from the village garden shop and spent hours clearing weeds. As the sun went down, I sat on the porch steps, fingers aching, dirt under my nails. I leaned back against the doorframe and let myself feel it. This was a place no one could throw me out of. I had the only key. My phone buzzed. Patricia, project approved. Board unanimous. Details when you're back. I looked up at the Worcestershire sky darkening above the apple tree. The first star was just coming out. Back in Brighton, everything accelerated. The project got a name. Credit Bridge. Simple, functional, exactly what it was. A bridge from one side of a broken credit record to the other. Patricia cleared out a storage room for the office. I put up a whiteboard with the first-year target. 50 households. The applications came quickly. I sat at my desk and listened to story after story. A middle-aged man with bad credit because his ex-wife had opened cards in his name, now unable to get a rental. A young single mother whose account had been hit by a duplicate telecom charge, and whose credit file now made her ineligible for a basic broadband plan. A retired pensioner whose son had used his identity for online loans, leaving the father with nothing but debt. Every time I heard, "They were family, I didn't think they'd do that," I remembered Alistair's face in the garden. The way he'd snatched the folder. It became a strange kind of therapy. Helping others repair their credit was like repairing my own. My credit report had been cleared, but I knew too many people whose records had other people's nails hammered into them. Not everyone had a lawyer, a grandmother who left them a house, a boss like Patricia. But I could keep the lights on later. One Thursday night in November, I was entering files when I heard footsteps in the corridor. Fiona. No camel coat this time. Denim jacket, trainers, hair in a ponytail, a worn canvas bag on her shoulder. She knocked on the half-open door. "Can I come in?" I set down my pen. "What are you doing here?" "I took the train." She sat down in the chair across from my desk. "I didn't tell Mum and Dad." "Okay, why?" She slid a file across the desk. "Read this." Inside, a copy of her resignation from the real estate agency and an application for a retraining course. Urban Planning Assistant, Manchester. "What's this?" "I quit." She wound her fingers together. "Dad wanted me to take over at the credit union, but she bit her lip. I paid back that loan. Every pound. My own savings. And I found out there were other accounts Mum opened in your name. Some credit cards you didn't know about. My blood went cold. How much? About 13,000 total. She wouldn't look up. I paid those too. All cleared. Here's the proof. I flipped through the receipts. 3 credit cards, a small consumer loan, a mobile phone contract, all opened between 2019 and 2020, all in my name. The bills had gone to Moraton. I'd never seen a single statement. "When did you know?" My voice was flat. "Grandmother's house, after she died. I found a notebook with her handwriting. She checked credit records. She knew Mum was still opening accounts in your name. She was too sick to tell you." Fiona's hands twisted tighter. "I didn't tell anyone. I thought if I said anything, they'd cut off my cards. And you were already gone, so it wouldn't fix anything. So you waited 5 years. After I visited you." Her voice cracked. "I went back and paid. All of it. With my own money from jobs and savings." I pulled out a certificate of full settlement dated the previous week. The accounts were zeroed. The office was quiet. Wind rattled the window. "You came all this way to show me this?" I asked. "One more thing." She looked up, eyes red. "Mum and Dad had a huge fight. I overheard. Mum wanted to remortgage the Moraton house for another loan. Dad refused. She said grandmother left the house to you, and not her, and she was furious. Dad said if she touched your name again, he'd turn himself in. I leaned back. He won't do that. His reputation is everything. He was packing a bag, Fiona said. Inside it were credit union records, ones he shouldn't have touched. If he turns those over, he'll go to prison too. Blackmail? Then. I don't know. Fiona stared at the floor. Mum hired another lawyer. Not Harper, some firm in London. She's going to fight for grandmother's house. I looked at the mess on my desk. Project applications, cleared debts, resignation letters. They were pieces of a picture that was becoming clear. Grandmother had given me the house, knowing this might happen. She'd put me somewhere they couldn't reach. Tell her, I said, to do whatever she wants. The deed is in my name. The codicil is clear. I'm not scared. Fiona stood, hesitating. Can I stay tonight? My train isn't until tomorrow. Ista dit haar. Red-rimmed eyes, frayed canvas bag strap, a dirty patch on her jacket sleeve. The girl who'd cried to my mother 15 years ago stood in front of me now with a stack of paid bills. I have one mattress. I said, I can sleep on the floor. Did you bring a sleeping bag? She pulled a compressed bag from her canvas rucksack. I almost laughed. It was the first time in years I'd felt that impulse with her. I caught myself and pulled an old yoga mat from the storage closet. That night, I lay on my bed and listened to Fiona's breathing even out in the corner. Rain against the basement window. The 14-year-old in me, curled in a Moreton bedroom, could maybe loosen her grip a little. Fiona was right. A week later, Harper called. Your mother's London firm, Cavendish Associates, has filed a formal objection to the Worcestershire property. They claim it was a gift made while your grandmother was mentally unstable and lacks legal validity. They've requested your grandmother's full medical records from 2015 to 2019. I sat at my desk, credit bridge reports in front of me. She had a cognitive assessment in 2018. She was completely lucid. I have a copy. Are you ready? I was ready the day I got the key. I said, send them everything and copy the bill to my father. I want him to know what this is costing. A beat of silence. Eleanor, Cavendish specializes in delays. They don't need to win. They just need to outlast your legal budget. I can't afford much. I looked at the whiteboard behind me, but I've met 37 people this month whose family members forged their names. I've learned one thing. Forged signatures don't hold up in court if you have the evidence. You're confident. I have the truth. After I hung up, Patricia leaned in the door. Your mother's moving? Property fight. She crossed her arms. Need the organization to supply a character reference? I can get the board to vouch for your professional stability. You don't mind getting involved in my personal stuff. Your personal stuff is the organization's stuff. Patricia shrugged. Remember that man whose ex-wife took out loans in his name? We gave him a reference too. It's what we do. I turned back to the whiteboard and added a new line. Legal referral service, contacting 3 pro bono firms. Mid-December brought the heaviest snow Brighton had seen in 5 years. Gray-white fog rolled in off the channel, waves laced with ice. I stood at the second-floor window at Bright Path, watching the snow fall. Fiona sat at the folding desk beside me, studying her planning materials. She'd moved into Mill Lane temporarily and came to Brighton most weekends to help with project files. When she texted, I don't have anywhere else to go. I'd written back, okay. She had a gift, the same one she'd used to charm my mother, but now she used it to put applicants at ease. Once, she spent 2 hours with a young woman whose ex-boyfriend had opened credit accounts in her name. When the woman left, her eyes were red, but she was smiling. Watching from my desk, I thought of grandmother's letter. You carry weight for others. Maybe Fiona was learning to carry her own. That afternoon, My phone rang with a Moriton number. Not my mother, not my father. Aunt Edith. Eleanor. Her voice dropped low, as if she was hiding. Your father is in the hospital. I gripped the phone. What happened? His heart. He had an attack last week. Your mother called the ambulance. He's at Royal York. They did a stent. A pause. He didn't tell your mother to call you. I got your number from the nurse. I leaned against the windowsill. Snow slid down the glass outside. How bad? He can get out of bed. But she hesitated. He and your mother had a huge row in the ward. The nurse heard it. Your mother threw a vase against the wall. Your father said if she touched your grandmother's house, he'd turn himself in. Is he serious? I don't know. Eleanor, Edith's voice caught. Your father has done a lot of wrong things. But that night in the hospital, his blood pressure hit 200. He called your name. The nurse told me. My forehead pressed against the glass. The snow thickened. The Brighton coast had nearly disappeared. Thank you for telling me. Are you going to see him? I don't know. I stood at the window for a long time. Patricia came in, saw my face, set down a cup of tea, and left. Fiona looked up from her materials. Dad had a heart attack, I said. Fiona put down her pen and came to stand beside me. Are you going? Do you think I should? She was quiet. I think you should go for yourself. Not for him. If you go because you want the girl on the porch 5 years ago to get what she deserved, then go. But if you're going out of guilt, don't. I watched the snow pile on the opposite roof. Fiona's voice had changed. She used to never say, for yourself. Next Saturday, I said, you water the Mill Lane garden. Then come with me. If I come back from York in bad shape, I'll take you to the curry place. She smiled. I decided to go. December 22nd, 2 days before Christmas. 4 hours by train, changing twice at York. A taxi to the hospital. Wind almost tore the umbrella from my hands. The ward was on the 3rd floor. I stood in the corridor for nearly 10 minutes, watching nurses while carts passed. I took a breath and pushed open the door. Alistair was half sitting in the hospital bed, blue-striped pajamas, making him look smaller than I'd ever seen him. Hollow cheeks, gray stubble, a dying bunch of lilies on the bedside table. When he saw me, the open book on his lap slid to the floor. Eleanor. I sat in the chair by the bed, and Edith called. His lips moved. Those lips that had once negotiated so smoothly now worked like rusted hinges. Your mother's lawsuit. I'm not here to talk about that. He closed his mouth, looked at his hands on the blanket. After a long time, I knew about the vase. The Wedgwood. I knew Fiona broke it. I gripped the strap of my bag. You knew. Your mother came out of the kitchen saying you'd done it. I saw Fiona behind the stairs with a piece of broken china in her hand. I didn't say anything. Your mother was in a bad mood. I didn't want to make things worse. So you let me take the blame. I've regretted it. He lifted his eyes, yellowed, deep set, but I didn't know how to say it. Once I spoke, I'd have to admit I'd known all along and never corrected it. The room hummed with the heaters ticking. When you forged my name for the loan, I said, you knew that was wrong too. Yes. His voice was almost inaudible. Your mother said Fiona's chance was a one-time thing. Your credit would repair itself in a few years. She said you weren't planning to buy a house. And you listened. I thought you wouldn't find out. He gripped the blanket. I paid the principal back. But the interest and marks stayed on your report. I couldn't tell anyone. Until Harper's documents came. I looked at the man in the bed. He'd been a puppet his whole life, pulled by my mother's strings. Complicit, yes, but also manipulated. Both could be true. Is that all you wanted to say? No. He fumbled in the bedside drawer and pulled out an envelope. I wrote a full statement. Every account your mother opened in your name between 2019 and 2020. She used them to cover our shortfalls at the credit union. There was more than the 8,000. I've listed everything. I opened it. 3 pages in his handwriting, each entry dated and detailed, amounts, dates, who handled the paperwork. Signed. You're admitting you were part of the forgery. Yes. He looked past me, toward the gray sky. Your mother told me she'd fight for the house until she won it. I told her you weren't an outsider. His voice cracked. She's my daughter. I held the pages. The edges had gone soft from sweat. I won't use this right now, I said, but I'll keep it. If you or Mum touch my name, my credit, my house again, I will. He nodded. I stood. At the door, he said, Eleanor. I stopped. I never said it. His voice was ragged and broken. I'm sorry. I held the door handle for a moment. Outside, the corridor sounds, trolley wheels, footsteps, Christmas carols from a TV in another room. I pulled the door open. Cold air rushed in. Get some rest, I said, and walked out. Christmas Eve, I went back to 7 Mill Lane. Fiona was already there, gardening gloves on, a cardboard box by her feet. She'd cleared the last of the dead weeds and hung a garland of dried orange slices and cinnamon sticks on the front door. How was he? She asked. Alive. That's it. I hung my jacket. The kitchen smelled of mulled wine, orange slices, and cloves floating in dark liquid. You learned to make this. YouTube. She shrugged. You said you weren't coming back to Brighton. Thought you'd want something. We sat on the quarry-tiled floor that evening, leaning against the wall, because I didn't know how to work the fireplace. Candles on the mantel, snow falling outside, mulled wine in mismatched cups, a cardboard box of mince pies and chocolate biscuits from the village shop. Mum called. Fiona said, breaking a biscuit in half. Dad's home. They're not speaking. She's going to London to see Cavendish in person. Let her. You're not worried? I have Dad's written statement and records of the accounts she opened. If she pushes, the police will get both. She should be more worried about spending Christmas in a cell. Fiona bit into the biscuit. You've gotten tough. I've gotten smart. We were quiet. Candlelight flickered. Snowfall whispered against the windows. The vase, Fiona said, her voice soft. Every time I see Wedgwood, anywhere, I think of you. You could have said it was me. You didn't. I looked at her profile against the candlelight. Her eyes were slightly red, but her mouth was steady. If I'd blamed you, I said, Mum would have said I was making it up. She never believed you could do wrong. You were the perfect daughter. Fiona laughed, a bitter half sound. Perfect. Someone always taking the blame for me, paying my debts. Of course I was perfect. And now, she looked at the ceiling. My class in Manchester. We had a group project on repurposing empty shops. We got top marks. The lecturer said my data was sharp. I never knew I could enjoy that kind of work. When I designed model show homes, I just liked picking cushions and lighting, making things look nice. But this project, I interviewed an old woman who ran a bakery that closed 5 years ago. She told me how a fake landlord took all her savings. I rewrote the whole proposal 3 times. She turned to face me. I don't want the old life anymore. I looked into her eyes. They used to have that spoiled, calculating brightness. Now, they held something heavier. Have you wondered, I said, why grandmother left the house to me, and not you? Yes. She dropped her gaze. Because you carried things. I was carried. She saw it perfectly. I finished my mulled wine, took both cups to the sink. When I came back, I pulled the brass key from my jacket pocket and set it on the floor between us. She stared. What? You need a place until your course finishes in spring. The cottage is empty. Take the key. But the rose bush in the garden, don't cut it bare. She picked up the key like it might bite. You're not afraid Past is past. You learn to pay debts, to make mulled wine, to listen to old women tell hard stories. If you wanted to be the old Fiona, you wouldn't have bought a sleeping bag and slept on my basement floor. She pressed the key to her chest, bent her head. After a long moment, I heard the tiniest muffled sob. I sat back against the wall, facing the window. Snowfall, candle wax melting into white peaks on the mantel. New Year's Day, I took the early train back to Brighton. Fiona stayed at Mill Lane. She said the rose bush needed winter pruning. Before I left, I looked out the back window. She was crouched among the dead stalks, shears in hand, carefully working around the thorny branches. Back at Bright Path, Patricia put a folder with a red ribbon on my desk. Happy New Year. The board doubled Credit Bridge's second-year budget. Inside, a sticky note. Patricia Harris proposed the Eleanor Winslow Credit Repair Pilot Fund. Passed unanimously. I blinked. Named after me? Your name is worth £200,000 to the board now. Patricia leaned in the doorway with her tea. And your grandmother's codicil naming the organization as a fallback. The board wants to start an Isabel Winslow Fund for long-term support, drawing from your trust yearly. I stared at my name on the page. It had been on loan documents, overdue bills, my mother's complaints. Now it was here, on something that helped others rebuild. Also, Patricia pulled a folded note from her pocket. Your sister, the one at Mill Lane, called yesterday. Fiona has your number? She stored it when she visited. She said the rose bush in your grandmother's garden is called Isabel Winslow, a deep red cultivar from the 1970s. She asked if she could take cuttings to plant in our front bed this spring. Something tightened in my throat. She knows we have a front bed. She said she walked the whole street when she was here. I pushed the window open. Cold January air, salt from the channel. The flower bed across the street was bare, frozen solid. But spring would come. My grandmother's roses would bloom in a place the Winslows couldn't touch. My phone buzzed. Fiona. A photo of the rose bush, one last late flower half wilted on the winter branch. Deep red petals curling at the edges, like a hand finally loosening. 2 words. Spring soon. I typed back. Take your cuttings. Then I put the phone away, closed the window, and pulled the pile of new applications toward me. The 3rd Monday after New Year, Harper called early. Cavendish has filed a formal motion for your grandmother's full medical records from 2015 to 2019, cognitive evaluations especially. They found an expert witness, Dr. Harding, the psychiatrist who did her last 2 checkups. They'll say she was possibly showing early cognitive decline when she signed the deed in 2017. Possible. I set down my coffee, carefully worded, but it's enough to delay. She had a clean cognitive assessment in 2018, and her solicitor witnessed her signing the codicil. Both documents are with you. I have them, but Cavendish will argue family history of mental illness. We don't have a history of mental illness. Dr. Harding mentioned in his notes that your grandmother had mild depressive tendencies late in life. You can guess how they'll spin that. I closed my eyes. I need an independent forensic psychologist who specializes in wills and capacity. Know anyone? One in Manchester, Claire Morrison. She's done hundreds of these evaluations, but she's not cheap. Her fee comes from my trust account. It's my money. I paused. Also, set up a meeting with Dr. Harding. I'll see him myself. You want to meet the other side's expert witness? I won't talk about the case. I just want to ask him what my grandmother said the last time he saw her. Harper paused. Risky, but all right. Yorkshire was even grayer than Brighton in January. I arrived at Dr. Harding's private practice in Harrogate on a Thursday morning, a red brick Victorian house, dead ivy on the front, a wood fire crackling in the consultation room. Dr. Harding himself was younger than I'd expected, 50s, silver-rimmed glasses, a green sweater. When he read my name on the appointment list, his eyes flickered. "I'm Eleanor Winslow," I said, taking the seat across from him. "Isabel Winslow's granddaughter." He took off his glasses, polished them, put them back on. "I know why you're here. Your mother's lawyers have been in touch." "I know. I'm not here about the case. I want to know, the last time you saw my grandmother, what was it like?" He leaned back, watching the fire. "February 2019. She came in for her annual physical. She drove herself, parked perfectly. When she walked in, she laughed about the holly bush outside being blown sideways. She told me she'd been going through old photos and found one of the rose garden at her Worcestershire house. She'd planted it 40 years earlier. She talked about those roses for 20 minutes, what cultivar, when she put them in, how many times they bloom each season." He turned to me. "Does someone with that kind of memory sound impaired to you?" My nose stung. "No, I did a full cognitive screening, orientation, memory, language. She was perfect. My assistant documented everything, and I still have the record because—" He paused. "Before she left, she said something. She said, 'Dr. Harding, my daughter may call you one day about my mental state. When she does, don't look at my chart. Remember the roses.'" I held my bag strap, fingers white. Grandmother had seen it all coming. Dr. Harding pulled a file from his drawer. The complete evaluation from February 2019. Original. Take a copy. And he slid a card across the desk. "I've declined Cavendish's invitation to testify." In that evaluation, it's written in black and white. Cognitive function normal, full legal capacity. They didn't read it when they contacted me. "They did," I said. "They bet you wouldn't say the truth on the stand." He leaned back, firelight reflecting in his lenses. "I've been a doctor for 31 years, Miss Winslow. I know the difference between possibly and definitely. Your grandmother in February 2019 was absolutely capable of signing any legal document." I took the copy and stood to leave. At the door, Dr. Harding said, "She told me one more thing. She said she had a granddaughter who was as stubborn as she'd been at that age. She said if that granddaughter ever found me, I was to pass on a message. Roses die back in winter, but the roots are still alive." I stood with my back to him and swallowed hard. "Thank you. Thank the old lady. She left you a lot of backups." Mid-February, Fiona called from Mill Lane. She was out in the garden, working on rose cuttings. I heard wind and bird song in the background. Mum's lawyers contacted me. She said, "I spun my pen at the credit bridge desk. They want you to testify." They asked about grandmother's emotional state, whether anyone in the family mentioned her being forgetful. "What did you tell them?" I told them she wrote me a letter a few months before she died, nagging me to get a proper qualification instead of maxing out credit cards. Fiona's voice had a dry humor in it. I said her memory was better than mine. The lawyer paused for a long time and said my testimony might not help my mother's case. I told them, "Good." I stopped spinning the pen. "You sure?" "I'm sure." I told them about the vase, too. If they want me on a stand, I'll explain that my grandmother in 2017 was completely clear on who she trusted and who she didn't. What did they say? They said they'd be in touch. I don't think they will. You've got Dr. Harding's records. I've got my refusal. Dad's got his statement. Mum can triple Cavendish's budget and still lose. I leaned back, looking at the whiteboard. 80 households, the second-year target. We'd already helped 43. Number 44 was a young woman whose story mirrored mine. Her brother opened 4 credit cards in her name, left her with £20,000 in debt, and her family told her to sort it out before she came home. "Fiona." "Yeah." "Did you take the cuttings from Mill Lane?" "Rooted. 2 cuttings already growing. Plant them at your office in spring. Save a spot for me." Okay. I hung up and opened file number 44. A girl named Chloe, 20 years old, homeless, no other family. I called her, and when she answered with a tiny, anxious voice, I said, I'm Eleanor. Your application's been received. Can you come in tomorrow afternoon? Really? Her voice cracked with hope. Really? Bring nothing but yourself. In early March, Cavendish withdrew. Harper's email was brief. The other side has confirmed they are not proceeding. Case terminated. Costs to be paid by the applicant. I read it 4 times, then sent back. Thank you for staying with me. He called. Your mother and father are separating. I hear she's moved to London, staying with one of the Cavendish partners. Your father has resigned from the credit union and moved to Scarborough with his brother. Does Fiona know? Your father called her. He wants to see both of you. Harper paused. He wants to take you both to dinner in Scarborough. He said he wants to try doing things right while he still can. I put a hand over my eyes. I don't know. You don't have to decide. The house is yours. The fund is settled. You owe no one. But if I go, then you go for yourself. Not because they need you. I texted Fiona. Dad wants dinner in Scarborough. When are you free? She replied, next Saturday. I added, bring the rose cuttings. Done. March wind off the north, sea cut to the bone. Fiona and I walked 20 minutes from the station along the bay, waves smashing the breakwater, gulls wheeling under lead gray sky. Dad had chosen a place on the 2nd floor, overlooking the water. A tiny vase of daffodils on the windowsill. Alistair sat in the corner booth. He wore a plain navy jacket, no suit, no tie. His hair was longer than it had been in the hospital, silver gray at the temples, trimmed neatly. He'd lost weight, hollow-cheeked, but his eyes had more life than I'd seen in a long time. He stood when we came in, catching himself on the table. Fiona slid into the seat across from him. I took the other side. The waitress brought menus and water, glancing at the 3 of us, father and daughters, maybe, though we didn't look like a family. I ordered fish and chips and mussels. Alistair said. His voice was lower than before, the negotiator's smoothness gone. Order whatever you want. Fiona ordered white wine. My treat. He blinked at her. I got a small scholarship from my training course. She closed her menu. Eleanor, what do you want? Just a pot of tea. When the waitress left, the 3 of us sat silent for a moment. Waves hissed against the seawall. Alistair put his hands flat on the table, visible, open. I resigned from the credit union. He began like someone reading a rehearsed speech. Not for health reasons. There were too many things I'd signed off on, too many I'd covered up. I've handed my records to the regional authorities. They're investigating. I'll likely face charges, maybe a light sentence. Fiona's hand froze around her water glass. You handed them over? I can't live anymore pretending what I did wasn't happening. He looked past us, toward the gray water. After you both left, I'd sit in that house alone, listening to the clock in the living room. And all I could think about was the signatures I'd faked. I drank my tea, said nothing. He turned back to me. Eleanor, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to call me Dad. I just want you to know I never knew about the house your grandmother left you. If I had, I wouldn't have let Margaret touch it. But that's meaningless to say now. It's not meaningless. I set my cup down. You said it. He blinked, his eyes wet. He wiped his sleeve across them, then looked at the wine bottle the waitress had just delivered. Fiona opened the wine and poured 3 glasses. She raised hers toward the sea and the gray sky, to grandmother's roses. I raised mine. Alistair lifted his. 3 glasses clinked softly above the wood table, and outside a gull swept past the window. We didn't linger. Fish and chips, mussels with bread, wine cooling in the sea air. Alistair told us about Scarborough. his brother's small house with a sea view, his daily 40-minute coastal walks, his cardiologist saying he was improving. He spoke without looking at us, like a monologue. We listened and offered small responses. At the door, he took a small wooden box from his pocket, thumb-sized, worn smooth, and handed it to me. Your grandmother left this with me. She said to give it to you when I'd figured things out. Inside, a silver ring, engraved inside with the tiniest letters, for the one who carries. Fiona leaned in, sniffed, and managed not to cry. What did she leave for me? Alistair pulled a folded letter from another pocket. For you, she said to give it when you'd stopped being carried. I think now is the right time. Fiona took it, unfolded it in the dim light of the entrance. She didn't cry, just stood there, reading for a long moment. Then she folded it away. She loved me too. Alistair smiled. A real smile, lines deep around his eyes. Of course she loved you. She just wanted to give it at the right time. Fiona and I walked on the beach for a long time that night, wind snapping our scarves. She didn't tell me what was in the letter, and I didn't ask. After about half an hour, she said, I finish my training in spring. I'm looking at community planning jobs in Manchester. Have you thought about expanding Credit Bridge to other cities? Not until we get at least 100 successful cases. Then count me in, she said. I'll help you expand. I turned to look at her profile against the dark water. Her jaw had sharpened. Her gaze was level, fixed on the horizon. All right, I said, April 2027. The rose arch at Mill Lane bloomed. Fiona sent video to our chat. Deep red flowers covering half the arch, old branches and new grafts twined together like a door made of petals. Tom was behind the camera saying, next year it'll be even thicker. That same week, Credit Bridge went to London for a consultation with the Department for Communities and local government. Fiona represented the project. Patricia sent me the video, and I watched on my office computer, watched her speak clearly and confidently at the podium, saw officials taking notes. After work, I walked to the flower bed in front of Bright Path. The two cuttings, once the size of chopsticks, had grown into a dense shrub of deep red, buds clustering on every branch. I put my hand on the thickest stem, felt the warmth of the April sun. My phone buzzed. Chloe, I found a credit counseling firm willing to take on number 53's case. For free. She cried. I almost cried too. I sent back a rose emoji. Then I brushed dirt from my knees, turned, and walked back through the glass doors. The lights were still on in the corridor, volunteers organizing appointment files, Patricia leaning out of her office to wave. I went to my desk, opened the New Year's project folder. Page 1, the team list. Third line, Fiona Winslow, Regional Outreach Coordinator. Second to last line, Chloe Harper, Junior Files Coordinator. At the bottom, this program is supported by the Isabel Winslow Memorial Fund. I read it twice. Then I opened my wallet, grandmother's photo, and my Credit Bridge Project Director business card side by side. I set the card on the desk, smoothing its curled edge. Outside, Brighton was waking from winter. Gulls flew over roofs, tinted gold by sunset. The deep red rose bush swayed in the evening wind, roots in the soil, branches reaching for the sky. I called Harper. Mr. Harper, it's Eleanor. Child, what do you need? I need a legal review on a new venture. We're opening Credit Bridge's first regional branch in Manchester. Lease agreements, registration structure. Papers rustled on his end. You're expanding already? Fiona has community contacts there. I think it'll work. Send me the documents. I'll have them reviewed this week. Thank you. Eleanor, he called before I could hang up. Your grandmother would have been so proud. I held the phone and looked through the window at the rose bush in the last light. I know. In the years that followed, When old Moreton neighbors gossiped at the pub, they said the yellow house at the end of Sycamore Lane belonged to an old man named Winslow, who walked to the church graveyard every Sunday with white flowers. They said he'd planted deep red roses in the back garden, cuttings from somewhere in Worcestershire. They said sometimes he'd sit alone on the porch swing, an old envelope in his hand, staring south. No one knew what he was looking at. But hundreds of miles away, at the entrance to Bright Path in Brighton, a deep red rose bush bloomed every year. And every year, more people walked through those glass doors with battered credit reports and broken spirits, and walked out with clean records and a new key in hand, a key that opened a door of their own, like the door Eleanor Winslow opened at 7 Mill Lane with the brass key her grandmother had left her. Behind it, no one but herself, her own footsteps on the quarry tiles, making a path where none had been. And that path went all the way to the sea.